Hey everyone, Kathy the Vegan Prepper here, bringing you a video all about some forever foods for your long-term preparedness pantry. Let's get right into it. Okay, I know I said we were going to get right into it, but I'm interrupting myself because I know some of you have to already be wondering, forever foods? What's the catch? And I'm telling you, the catch is that they need to be stored correctly in order for them to maintain their maximum shelf life. Number one concern being protecting them from extreme temperature fluctuations, extreme heat, things like excess moisture, oxygen, pests, all that stuff. So there are plenty of videos online that show you how to do Mylar bag storage and all of that stuff, and we keep threatening to make our own video, but we haven't done it yet, but we will be doing it very soon, maybe. So find the information so that you can store these things effectively so that they will actually last you a really long time. And now seriously, I'm gonna stop interrupting myself and let's get right into it. Okay, let's get right into it. So the number one, beloved Pete, how many times am I gonna say that? Okay, so let's talk about a few of the kind of basic dry goods that you could have on hand that will last you basically forever. Number one being salt. And now I definitely recommend having a whole bunch of salt on hand, even if you don't eat a lot of it, because salt is good for so much more than just flavoring your food. It's good for preserving your food, for cleaning things. And I'm thinking too, like ferments with salt, pickling, canning. Usually salt is used in a lot of different methods for preserving food because salt is a preservative. So have a bunch of salt on hand. Also, if you can imagine what it would be like to be living in a world without any salt for your food, that would just be the worst. So go ahead and get yourself some salt. And next would be sugar. It's the same thing. The sweetness of life is in the sugar. But again, even if you don't eat sugar and you're, super good and you don't eat sugar, you're like better than I am in every single way. But sugar is great to have on hand because it is also great for preserving. And I'm thinking of things like ferments that involve like fruits instead of vegetables. A lot of times we'll start off with a sugary base. Kombucha too starts off with a very sweet tea. Your homemade vinegars, even homemade wines will start off using quite a lot of sugar in the early stages because sugar is the food for the bacteria that do the work of the fermentation in that thing. And so for your things like your kombuchas, your vinegars and stuff, at the end, they don't really have a high sugar content, if they really have any sugar content, because the bacteria has gone through and eaten the sugar in the thing so that it can create the new food, so, or drink, as it were. So yeah, sugar is great to have on hand, even if you don't eat a lot of it. Next up, I'm just going to say three things really rapidly. Baking soda, again, cleaning, deodorizing, so many reasons you could have baking soda on hand, just so great. Cream of tartar, which is a great main ingredient in like baking powders, but also you can make Play-Doh out of it and do some kind of fun stuff like that. And then also cornstarch, which I don't have with me because I'm ordering more. I usually use arrowroot starch, but now that I know that cornstarch is a forever food, I'm going to start ordering organic cornstarch instead. And then cornstarch itself is so good for so many things too. It is also like it'll dry up or absorb oils. So it's great for making like a dry shampoo and things like that. It's useful for so many things other than just cooking applications. But also you can make your own baking powder from those three ingredients, which I just listed: the baking soda, the cream of tartar, and the cornstarch, actually also arrowroot starch, which is what I have been using. I make my own baking powder. I have for years. I cannot even remember the last time I bought the little thing at the store. I just have made my own baking powder for so long. But basically it is 1 part baking soda, 1 part cornstarch or arrowroot starch, and then 2 parts cream of tartar. And you just mix that up, and then you have a baking powder that you can use in your recipes that you didn't have to buy at the store. But incidentally, baking powder is also a forever food, but obviously if you stock the other 3, you don't have to stock baking powder. The efficacy of baking powder is said to go down over time, and that might be true, but I know from several other preppers I've watched who say that they have used some kind of older baking powder and it still works really well. If you have very old baking powder, you may want to just go ahead and start off with double the amount called for in the recipe, because even if it loses some of its efficacy, it can still work, just maybe not as well. So you'd increase the amount of baking powder in the recipe, and that should kind of take care of a lot of it. Okay, moving on, we just have a couple more things in this section. Organic, well, it doesn't have to be organic, I guess. Mine is unbleached all-purpose flour. Actually, I don't know if it has to be unbleached. It's just general all-purpose flour. This is essentially a forever food. Some people say it's eternal. Some people say it's like 20 to 30 years. So I did go ahead and stick it in this front section of actual forever foods. So I actually didn't even have, kind of almost like with the cornstarch, I didn't even have one to show you until I was watching videos and reading articles in order to research all of the ingredients across all of the interwebs and all of my books. It was a lot of research went into this video. But Adam started seeing the videos with the hardtack. And if you don't know what hardtack is, it's like ship's biscuits. It's essentially just like this preparation that you can put together. It's flour, water, and salt. And once you have baked it like 2 or 3 times or whatever, you basically get this brick cracker thing that's going to last you for centuries. So it is a way to seriously preserve some sort of dry good food or whatever. So anyway, you might be interested in looking into some hardtack. I know Adam is going to make some. I was not interested in making it. I'm surprised that he was, but he's going to make some. So we'll probably have a video on that eventually. And then the last 2 things are, number 1 is dry bouillon cubes. So it's like just little cubes of bouillon because it's essentially mostly just salt. I don't have any dry ones. I have some kind of oily type ones. But just rock hard dry bouillon cubes are a forever food. So that's great to know for storing up flavor for your stash. And then also instant coffee. Aren't we happy? It's like the angels are singing because it's a freeze-dried instant coffee. So any instant coffee that is freeze-dried is essentially a forever food because it's freeze-dried. And that's great news because regular coffee, even whole coffee beans, if you store them perfectly, they have a shelf life of about 3 to 5 years, if I'm remembering correctly. So if you absolutely have to have your coffee, even if instant coffee is like a curse word to you, instant coffee is something that you can stock up on. And actually, personally, we drink instant coffee when we drink it. We do appreciate a good brewed coffee, but these freeze-dried instant coffees are way better than they ever have been, and that one in particular is really good. So this is something that we have on hand, and it's something that you might want to have on hand to stock up for, so you still have your coffee. You don't get migraines just because you can't get your coffee. So anyway, we're going to go on to the next section. Okay, everyone, next is the section of liquid ingredients, and first is kind of the most obvious liquid of all, which is water. It is a forever ingredient as long as it hasn't been unsealed and it's not contaminated. Even water like this will last you basically forever, although common wisdom does say that it's best to cycle your water out every 6 months or so. I don't know if it has anything to do with leaching of the plastic into the water, or if it's more because these bottles tend to break down over time and you can end up with cracks and leaks. I have heard horror stories of people who have stored water in creative places like behind their couch or behind their bed, only to like leave it for forever and then have the water slowly leak and cause horrific structural damage to their home over time because they didn't catch it. So that is just sort of like a cautionary tale. Wherever you store your water, make sure you're at least checking on it. But you know, more like a 55-gallon drum would probably be more ideal, or even larger, you know, 275-gallon tanks, especially if you want to store any kind of significant amount of water for any significant amount of time. The recommendation is 1 gallon per person per day, and you can discuss or decide for yourself which level of comfort you have as far as a 3-day supply, a 2-week supply, a 3-month supply, 6 months on. And obviously a lot of that will have to do with your space, but I would say, gosh, probably at least 2 weeks worth of water for your household, in case, you know, some craziness happens. So yeah, water is number 1. And actually it is almost number 1 survival wise. And honestly, for me personally, even I do live in central Arizona, but even beyond that, like you can only live like 3 days without water. So I would say even before you stock up a ton of food focus on figuring out how you can stock up water. So anyway, that was my 2 cents about that. So next will be a controversial ingredient, at least on this channel. I'm not going to get into a huge controversy talk. I'm not going to get into a huge talk about it, but it's raw honey. So that is technically not vegan because it comes from bees. I have spoken before at length about my philosophy on things like honey and beeswax. The very short version is that I feel that a natural material that I can source practically from my own backyard, not literally, but like this is a bulk buy from a local grower or a local beekeeper. And it is a forever thing. It's got first aid applications. There's just so many wonderful things about honey in particular, beeswax in particular too. And again, I can source that very locally. And I feel like it's just more responsible than getting some wax from Brazil or whatever, personally, because that's where the war between animal welfare and the environment comes in for me on honey and bee products. Again, I don't mean to get into it too hard. I know that there's somebody out there like, what? You have honey? It's like, yes, I have honey. Sorry, sometimes I kill like 300 aphids if I want a leaf of kale from my yard, okay? And I think a lot of times that colors my view on things like honey and stuff that comes from bugs in general, because we grow so much of our own food and I know how many bugs I have to kill in order to get my food. So take it or leave it. Say I'm not a real vegan. That's okay. I still think I'm a real vegan. I just, it's bugs, okay? All right, next is corn syrup, which I don't have a bottle of that either. That's just not an ingredient that I use, but corn syrup is also a forever food. And if you can get yourself some organic corn syrup, obviously that is ideal. The next 2 things I want to talk about are, to me, actually somewhat contentious, not because like it's controversial to people, but because different people, different places say different things about these 2. So the general consensus seems to be that maple syrup and molasses are both also forever foods, but kind of depending on who you read, they might not be. So I'm like confused about these 2, but I thought I would include them just because, like I said, most sources do list them as forever foods. So there you go, molasses and maple syrup. This one in particular, I would say, is probably even almost more important to stock up on, especially as a vegan, because it's got a hugely rich source of minerals in it. Like 1 tablespoon of molasses, of blackstrap molasses, has at least this kind, 15% of your calcium for the day, 25% of your iron, then like 8% of your potassium, which is honestly, potassium is not a big deal, but calcium and iron, big source of those things. So this would probably be a great thing to have, especially on hand as a vegan, whether you're a real vegan or not, and you use honey or not. I don't even know. Okay, I'm not getting into it. All right, so next up, we've got apple cider vinegar, another forever food. This is just a fantastic thing to have on hand. Also because even though you can make your own vinegars, which I have alluded to, it's great to have ready-made vinegar on hand. And then, yes, because it guarantees that it is 5% acidity, which is something that you need for a lot of canning and pickling recipes. You need to have a guaranteed acidity to your final product. And so having a vinegar that you have purchased is great. So apple cider vinegar, forever food, great thing to have on hand. Also great for cleaning and stuff. And then also similarly, white vinegar. Again, purchasing it, you're guaranteed the acidity. I think sometimes it's even more acidic than 5%. I can't remember what the other percentage is. But yeah, just having it on hand, again, just for general cleaning, disinfecting, things like that, flavoring to your foods, and then things like, yeah, canning and pickling and stuff like that. Also, as an aside, if you have raw apple cider vinegar, which still contains the mother, then it is a live and active vinegar culture. This can be used to as like a starter for other cultures, depending on what you're going for. So that's something that you can research and kind of look into. But again, these 2 are very versatile. Although I will say one little tidbit that I will share, because I would wonder why on earth did like a lot of spray bottle recipes, they call specifically for white vinegar. And I was wondering, well, why is it a big deal? Why not just use apple cider vinegar? And if you strain out the mother, It's because this is a live and active culture, and depending on what you're putting in your spray bottle, it's going to grow another mother. And so I have actually ruined a couple of my spray heads because they got clogged up with brand new apple cider vinegar mother, even though I strained it before I put it into the spray bottle. So as an FYI, apple cider vinegar is not for spray bottles, just white vinegar. All right. Okay. Okay, so next up we have soy sauce, and then I have just my liquid aminos. I'm not entirely sure if this counts. It's something that I want to research. I don't know why it wouldn't count, because the reason that soy sauce is a forever food is because the insanely high salt content. It's like nothing's going to grow in there ever. So as long as it's unopened, soy sauce should be a forever food. I don't know if this is. I hope. I'll do more research. But yeah, I just wanted to show that's what I have. So, also any kind of hard liquor. So here is some spiced rum I have on hand. I use rum for my tincture making, my herbal tincture, and even my extracts that I make, which brings me to the next thing, vanilla extract. As long as it is an actual vanilla extract, like in the actual alcohol, it will last forever because it's essentially an herbal tincture. And so essentially all herbal tinctures too will last forever. Herbal tinctures and extracts. So that is something that I have talked about before on this channel, where tinctures and extracts are a great way to preserve a lot of your herbs essentially forever. If you have something that's getting old, or, you know, even if it's not getting old, you just want to plan to go ahead and tincture a whole bunch of each herb. Now you have the medicinal effectiveness of that herb essentially in a forever form. And so we do a lot of tincturing, and that's why I have some hard liquor on hand, but these are essentially also forever foods. And then the final kind of liquid ingredient is coconut oil, which was really surprising to me, but multiple sources have said that coconut oil is probably your best fat for long-term storage. Now, we are mostly oil-free vegans. We don't cook with a lot of oil. Every now and then I have a recipe that I will use some coconut oil in, like a really special, like my super secret cornbread recipe, which is like people mow me down at church potlucks trying to get my recipe, and I'm like, no. So I use coconut oil in that recipe. But sorry. Like occasionally, so it's really not very often, but it's still great to have on hand. This is great for your dental care, oil pulling. Like this with baking soda too can be essentially a toothpaste. So if you want to be planning for your long-term hygiene, dental hygiene, definitely, you know, coconut oil is great to have on hand. Again, like I said, for oil pulling, making your toothpaste. This is also great to mix with sugar to create like an exfoliant and a skin treatment. Just so many things that you can do with coconut oil. I'm not sure all of it is true, but I do know some of it is. But just in general, again, this is a great way to add some calories to your stash, and potentially, again, like a morale booster, especially if you turn it into some kind of treat or whatever. So coconut oil is a great thing to have on hand. And from what I have also read and seen, palm shortening is also another one that is supposed to last pretty much forever. But from what I have also read, it is essentially a forever food as long as it remains solid. If you have it, it's probably that temperature fluctuation thing again. If you have it melt and then go solid and then melt and then go solid, it'll go bad faster than if it just stays solid. And this is, even though it's a relatively new thing in the West to be using coconut oil, this is something that has been in use for like forever in like the Pacific Islands and things like that. So there's a lot of experience with coconut oil in that part of the world, and stories, like anecdotal stories I've read of grandmas who have coconut oil that's 10 years old and it's still totally fine. So that's just as an FYI for you guys, coconut oil. All right, and then we're gonna get into the last section. Okay, I know I said I was doing the last section, but I'm interrupting myself again, okay, to talk about this one thing that is straight from the USDA website, that store-bought canned goods are essentially a forever food. As long as the can itself is not damaged or dented or whatever seal has remained intact, there is no reason that it should not be safe even decades after the original packaging. Now, obviously you open it and look for signs of spoilage. such as spurting, a bad smell, or whatever. And it is also not saying that the nutritional content of that food will remain good forever, but it will hold its calories, and so it could be something that you can eat just to keep yourself alive in like an extreme situation. Technically, canned goods never go bad. But one thing, and also actually I've read the same thing about home canned goods, as long as that jar is still sealed and perfectly intact. I think it was like canned peaches or pickles or something have been recovered that were like 150 years old or something, and they were still good. So that's just something to keep in mind. Obviously that is on to your own comfort level, and I personally would boil the crap out of any kind of really old canned foods that I came across before I would be willing to eat them. But it's just as an FYI. But I did want to mention really fast, I have personally never really liked cans that have this pull tab. I've stocked up a lot on these black beans, even though they have that pull tab, and I was thinking, well, gosh, maybe in an emergency situation, like if the can opener breaks or something, it would be nice to have some of these on hand. But I've always felt a little leery about these. And sure enough, Costco has begun to recall a ton of these black beans because they have had seal failures in this last year, which is when I've been stocking up on these black beans. So we actually had an entire package of these black beans with a failed seal, which we basically ate through. We only found out like with the last can because we got a brand new letter that they have expanded the recall, and Adam looked at the can that we had thrown into the recycle after we had already eaten our soup that night and found out that that can was part of the recall. So we ate the recalled black beans, actually all 8 cans. But they say so far nobody's been injured and like nothing happened to us, thank God. But it's that seal right there. I don't trust this. I feel like this is not as good a seal as this. And also, we're not going to even discuss about the fact that it was in this last year. So probably something slipped at the plant because they don't have enough people, or they're rushing things or something. And so this is where I'm so grateful that I'm beginning to home can a lot of my stuff because I'm not in a rush and I'm doing everything safely and correctly. Yeah, it's really nerve-wracking. Isn't that scary when the food producers produce stuff that's potentially not safe? So every single one of these I'm looking at, I feel like it's a ticking time bomb. I feel like I want to wait like a year before I'm willing to eat any of these again, because I don't know if they're going to expand the recall again to the beans that we already have in the pantry. Anyway, that's it. That was it. So essentially a forever food. Don't trust this one. Just get extra can openers on hand. Okay, the actual last section with no more interruptions is some kind of bigger dried goods, kind of some honorable mentions, because these are not technical like forever infinite foods. They are honorable mentions, which if stored correctly should last you anywhere from 20 to 30 years. That's pretty good, right? I feel we deserve to have a section of those foods on here. So this is where we're getting into some actual food. So if you were wondering, I would say besides water, where to start with your preps, you should start right here. So number 1, we have pasta. So just white pasta, because anything with whole wheat or whatever that still has the bran and it's ground up, it's not going to last you nearly as long. So white pasta stored correctly will last you anywhere from 20 to 30 years. Also popcorn, and I just mean like whole kernel popcorn is basically a forever food. It's just a dry whole grain. What's great about this is if you have a grain mill, which has the popcorn and bean auger attachment, which I don't have on my grain mill, and I didn't know that that was a thing until after I already bought it, so I need to buy it. But you have a grain mill that is capable of grinding these larger things like corn and beans. You can make your own polenta, your own cornmeal. So then this one ends up also being kind of multi-use, or corn flour for your tortillas, even though tortillas are typically made with masa harina, which is a little different, but you can get away with just like plain corn tortillas. And so, yeah, corn is a great thing to stock up on. Also, you know, it's fun. Put a little corn, a little coconut oil over a fire in a pot, covered pot. Make yourself some popcorn with some salt. You know, that's like all forever foods. And I'm just like, I'm going to be okay. As long as I can have some popcorn, I'll be fine. So popcorn. Also dried beans. So like I was just mentioning with the popcorn, any kind of dried bean, lentil, chickpea, black bean, pinto bean, whatever. Although they do get harder over time and they may not cook as well as they age. So this is one where even though technically it lasts 20 or 30 years, I would like to be cycling through my beans a little faster than that. And then also cooking and then dehydrating them and having them on hand in basically a pre-cooked form, I think is a great solution. But also if you have a grain mill with the capability of grinding something larger, even your really old beans that don't want to cook up all the way, you could take those and grind them into a bean flour and make flatbreads or thicken recipes, gravies, soups. Also, you can essentially make yourself an instant refried bean. Like if you grind up pinto beans into a powder and then you can just add water and like kind of cook it just a little bit, and then you end up with basically an instant refried bean. There's so many things that you can do with ground up beans, which is kind of surprising. Even me, as a vegan for almost 4 years now, was surprised to learn about all the stuff that you can do with beans. So that's something I'm going to be looking into more and more as we move forward. But yes, huge, amazing source of protein and iron and all kinds of stuff. So this is a great thing that I think everybody should have a ton of it on hand. Can we also say, like, it's less desirable too. Like people are not as interested in a lot of these foods, at least not yet. The word is not out. So I think a lot of times where meat lockers or counters or whatever will be cleared, you'll still have dried beans on the shelf. Okay, so this is a great kind of, even if you have a harder time accessing food right now, you might be able to still find some of these things because people don't really know how to use them or cook with them or do stuff with them. So learn how to cook and use these more natural foods, and that in and of itself is like a survival tactic. Okay, so that was just sort of a random thought thrown in there. But also white rice. So specifically white rice is a 20 to 30 year food. If stored correctly, it'll last you forever. And then obviously rice and beans together is a complete protein, even though the whole protein thing is not as big of a deal as people think it is, because you get multiple amino acids from multiple foods. It doesn't have to be in the same meal. As long as you're eating all of them at some point, you get them. So it's okay to like have a meal with just beans and something. You don't have to like make every meal a complete protein. It's just FYI. But all that being said, quinoa is a complete protein in and of itself. So it has all the essential amino acids. And this is a 20-year shelf life food, which is great because it's a whole grain that cooks quickly and is just easy to use. And so yeah, quinoa is a great one. Also very versatile. You can sprout it. And I just talked about this in another video. You can sprout it and then use it to make Rejuvelac, which is a fermented probiotic beverage, or you can use that as a culture starter for things like vegan cheeses and yogurts and even tofu. So quinoa is another great one to have on hand and to get to know, because it's so versatile, so many things you can do with it. Also some rolled oats. Rolled oats, I was really surprised to learn, is another kind of forever food. Rolled oats are a crazy good source of iron and all kinds of other stuff. Like I was really surprised. Just look up the basic nutrition of rolled oats, and I think you'll be surprised too at how nutritious this is. Also, it is great because this is a food that you can eat it raw. Like if you just mix it up with some fruit and pour a little bit of plant milk on top, you've basically got yourself some muesli, and you can just eat it like a cereal. So you don't even have to cook it in order to enjoy it. But then you can also take it and grind it into oat flour. You can bake it into granola. There's so many wonderful things that you can do with oats. And at some point, I just need to do a separate video on every single one of these foods and talk to you all about all the things you can do with them. Next up, I've got wheat. So whole kernel wheat berries, these happen to be soft white wheat, are a forever food, or not a forever food, but they will last you anywhere from 20 to 30 years, again, depending on whether or not they are stored correctly. So a soft white wheat is the kind of wheat that you would get to make like a whole wheat pastry flour, because it has less gluten in it. So this will create much softer baked goods, things that you're not needing a gluten structure for. Things like biscuits and muffins and cookies and stuff like that, like quick breads, things like that. But you would want to get yourself some hard wheat berries for things that require a gluten structure, like actual breads and like pizza dough and things like that. And then just like as an aside, this is actually a collection of wheat berries, which this is what's left from what I sprouted and dehydrated. And so now this is a sprouted wheat grain, which is still going to last 20 to 30 years as far as I have read and heard. This is essentially a sprouted, it's a vegetable now. So this is, let me talk to you about this. I'm gonna interrupt myself again. Dehydrated fruits and vegetables are another thing that can last you anywhere from 20 to 30 years. So it is not only freeze-dried foods that last a really long time, also dehydrated foods, especially the veggies. So when you sprout a wheat kernel, you essentially take it from a grain and start turning it more into a vegetable. It's kind of like on a spectrum, right? You go from grain to like a little closer to the veggie. I'm not gonna say this is a vegetable, but you've changed it enough that this is almost like a veggie. So I don't know any reason why this would not also last 20 to 30 years in its pre-sprouted form. Then you have something that's easier on digestion for people who can't process. So somebody who's not true celiac disease, but who has like a gluten intolerance may find themselves needing to be able to eat some of the foods that are stored up and have on hand. So it's good to know that if you sprout your wheat, it is entirely possible that even if you have a gluten intolerance, you'd be able to eat it because it's sort of changed its structure a little bit. So that's just sort of thinking ahead to like, if you have to eat your stores, and even if your store is not ideal to the way that you like to eat, you can kind of play with it. So this is also my mentality behind pre-cooking and dehydrating my beans. That a bean is essentially a vegetable as well. And so as soon as it gets dehydrated, I think it still has a 20 to 30 year shelf life. I cannot find information on that. This is my assumption, and you may choose to follow that or not. I'm gonna go with it, and hopefully it's okay. Hopefully I never really need to find out whether or not it's okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish this up pretty quick. Also, instant potato flakes. That is a 20 to 30 year food. So I don't have any to show you because all of mine are in Mylar bags with their oxygen absorbers over here in these totes. Instant mashed potato flakes are not a thing that we eat. We don't, when we make mashed potatoes, we use potatoes, but obviously in a survival situation, if we don't have access to potatoes, we will very much appreciate having instant mashed potato flakes on hand. And so it is good to know that that is a forever food. You can stock up on those. And then also cocoa powder. Again, I feel like the angels are singing here. You would not believe the amazing fudge type thing that you can make just from like a tiny bit of coconut oil, a little cocoa powder, a little bit of sugar or maple syrup or something, and you can create some of the most delectable chocolate treats. Cocoa powder, so knowing that cocoa powder is a 20 to 30 year food is just like, I feel my morale being lifted just talking about it. So yeah, stock up on cocoa powder, or this is actually cacao powder. Cacao powder is cool too. And some of these things, and kind of learn how to work with them. And yeah, hopefully lessen the blow of any kind of situation in which you will actually be needing to eat from these stores. So hopefully that was helpful to you. As always, jam-packed with information. I always say I want to make the videos shorter, and I know that some people would wish that I would just get to the point and make a list. It's like, well, I could have just made a list and you could read a list and you don't even need to hear me talk about it. But I think having a little bit of extra information is very helpful. And for the people who are willing to listen, it's for you, and you're the ones who are going to learn the things and be better off than the people who are not willing to listen. So anyway, that's just my opinion. You guys all know too that I think opinion is the lowest form of information, which is why I typically don't talk about stuff like that. But anyway, that's all. Yeah, for real. I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. So thank you for watching. If you know of any other kind of like something I said or something I didn't say about any one of these ingredients, please share in the comments down below and make it a big resource. I am so in love with the comment sections on a lot of my videos. People just start like posting and talking about all the stuff that they know, and it just expands. And so you can expand your knowledge possibly even more by looking through the comments of this video. And yeah, I definitely appreciate all that, because I don't know everything. Are you kidding me? I don't know even close to everything. So I would love to hear the things that you also know that I didn't cover. So anyway, I guess that's all. And as always, I hope the rest of your day is good and your life stays wonderful. I hope you never need any of the information that I'm giving you, but just in case, here you go. Okay. And as always, Yeah, I already said that part. Okay, just go. Just say bye. Okay, bye.